They say this generation of women is different. Too loud, too demanding, too selfish, too angry. They say we are the last generation to have known innocent mothers, mothers who didn't complain, mothers who didn't question, mothers who didn't ask for credit, rest, recognition, or escape. And this is said with nostalgia, with reverence, as if women's silence was virtue, as if women's exhaustion was grace, as if women's erasure was love. But here is the truth we are not allowed to say out loud. There was never anything innocent about that motherhood. What existed was coercion dressed as morality, exploitation dressed as sacrifice, and male entitlement dressed as tradition. Welcome back to The Personal Lens, where we explore the political through the personal, and today we dismantle the myth of the last generation of innocent mothers. What does innocent motherhood actually mean? When people speak of innocent mothers, they are not describing innocence, they are describing obedience. Innocent mothers are remembered as women who never say no, never expressed sexual desire, never resented marriage or motherhood, never named marital rape, never spoke of exhaustion, never wanted more. But mind you, silence is not innocence. Silence is often survival. Most women of previous generations did not choose motherhood freely. They inherited it through maybe early marriage, lack of contraception, criminalization of abortion, financial dependence, social ostracism of childless women maybe. To romanticize this is not only dishonest, it is violent. Now let's talk about the architecture of forced selflessness. Motherhood was framed as women's moral destiny, not a role. Once you are a mother, you stop being a sexual being, a desiring individual. You stop being a person with ambition, your body becomes a site of service, a vessel, a resource. And this wasn't accidental, it was structural. Patriarchal societies depended on women performing unpaid reproductive labor, bearing children, raising them, sustaining households, without naming it as work. And what better way to ensure free labor than to call it love? And this is why silence was mandatory, because innocent mothers didn't speak about marital rape, emotional abandonment, domestic violence, infidelity, mental illness, postpartum depression, and have no doubts that these didn't exist. But because language itself was denied to them, if a woman complained, she was ungrateful, characterless, a bad wife, a bad mother. So silence wasn't virtue, it was the cost of social survival. And that silence benefited men. And this myth protects male entitlement. Let's be very clear, this myth exists not to honor mothers, but to discipline women today. When men say our mothers never complained, what they mean is our mothers absorbed what we don't want to. They miss emotional labor without reciprocity, sex without consent being questioned, domestic work without acknowledgement, parenting without participation. So this nostalgia is not about love, it's about lost entitlement. Let us now come to the sexual politics of innocent mothers. Innocence is deeply gendered. An innocent mother is sexless after childbirth, modest, non-demanding, available but not desiring. And this allowed men to retain sexual freedom, seek pleasure elsewhere, and avoid accountability. So definitely, a woman who desires today is seen as corrupt, unmotherly, westernized, dangerous, because desire threatens control. But why is this myth resurfacing now? Because women today are naming emotional labor, refusing abusive marriages, choosing childlessness, demanding equal parenting, and speaking about burnout. The myth is backlash. It says, look how good women were before feminism ruined them. But feminism didn't ruin motherhood. What it actually did was expose the cost of motherhood. Let us also understand what we mistake for better mothers. Older generations didn't have legal protection, financial independence, or exit options. Endurance is not excellence. Suffering is not skill. They were not better mothers. They were trapped women doing the best they could. What we mistake for better mothers is often just endurance without options. We confuse silence with patience, self-erasure with selflessness, and survival with strength. Those women did not give more because they were inherently nobler. They gave more because they were allowed less choice, less financial independence, less legal protection, almost no social permission to refuse leave or rest. When a woman cannot exit a marriage, she learns to endure it. When she cannot negotiate care, she absorbs it. When she cannot name harm, she internalizes it. That adaptation is not virtue, it's a necessity. And necessity over time gets romantically misremembered as character. And then the emotional blackmail of gratitude. We are told you owe everything to your mother's sacrifice. But why was sacrifice necessary in the first place? Why was the system built so that mothers give endlessly, fathers help occasionally, gratitude replaces justice? Honoring mothers does not and should not mean replicating their oppression. And to bust this myth completely, we need to realize there was no golden age of motherhood. There was no innocence, only invisibility. There was no virtue, only forced endurance. What existed was patriarchy functioning smoothly, women absorbing violence quietly, men remaining emotionally untouched. So that last generation of innocent mothers never existed. What existed was the last generation forced into silence and servitude. The idea of the innocent mother survives because it asks women to disappear quietly and calls that love. It survives because it protects male comfort, excuses male absence, and turns women's unpaid labor into moral virtue. But once we name what that innocence actually cost, once we recognize how much silence, endurance, and erasure were demanded to keep families functioning, the nostalgia collapses. What we are witnessing today is not the decline of motherhood, it is the refusal to inherit suffering without question. So, what terrifies society today is not that women are worse mothers, but that women are no longer willing to disappear inside motherhood. We are not less loving, we are less obedient, we are not broken, we are awake. And once a woman learns that her silence was never noble, only necessary, the myth collapses. And that is what unsettles society the most. Because a woman who can speak, choose, and refuse is no longer easy to romanticize or control. That is why this story must be told, and that is why it is fought so hard. Because the moment we stop calling exploitation innocence, patriarchy loses its most obedient lie. Thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share for more of such conversations on the personal lens. Let us know your thoughts in the email given in the description. And until next time, keep questioning, keep reclaiming, and most importantly, keep looking through the personal lens.